Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. I'm John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Before we get to our interview, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the Film Florida podcast. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please consider going to our website and donating $20.22 for our 2022 fundraising campaign. We also have a Film Florida merchandise page. Visit filmflorida.creator-spring.com to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, and more. Jay Roewe is the Senior Vice President of Production Planning and Incentives for HBO, HBO Max, and Warner Media. A 30-plus year veteran of film and television production, he joined HBO in 1994, originally serving as Vice President of Production. In 2000, he began overseeing the miniseries division as well, until 2010, when he was promoted to Head of Physical Production for all series in the company. We talk about his career, the evolution of HBO and Warner Media, and his connection to Florida. Here's my conversation with Jay Roewe. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast, Jay.
Nice to be here, John. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Absolutely. And before we go through your career, I wanted to help people understand your current role. If I have it right, your official title is Senior Vice President of Production Planning and Incentives for HBO, HBO Max, and Warner Media. So that's a really long title, but what exactly does it mean?
Great question, John. I think one of the things for me is my career has continued to evolve. And I think one of the great things about working at HBO is it's been a place where I've been able to evolve. And as the company has evolved, I've been able to evolve with it. And because of where we are in our industry right now with all of the streaming, all of the content out there, we have blown up in terms of the amount of content we're putting out in the world. And coming from my background as a line producer, which we can touch upon, and being a production executive overseeing certain areas of production, I now have the honor and privilege to oversee and work very closely with Janet Grant-Borber, who's our head of production for all of our series and pretty much all the original content. And so I get these days to work with her and all the production executives to figure out where on the entire planet we're going to do our productions. And as I think many people are well aware of, as the industry is involved, this area of film and tax credits, which can sound a little technical and so on, has just blown up. There's now 100 different incentives around the world.
Right.
And even countries where there is no incentive, people still want our productions to come. And I'm saying literally everywhere on the planet. And so when we get a script or a project and it comes to the production group, we need to decide where we're going to place that production in the world. Mm-hmm. And so I get the privilege of sitting and working with a lot of production executives and producers and pretty much anybody who's working with us to figure out where do we want to shoot? And then if we want to go shoot somewhere, how do we go and shoot there? Mm-hmm. And sometimes they welcome us with open arms, but sometimes you need to make an application or ask the government for permission. And as you get into that process, there are obstacles and challenges that come up. And all of this myriad of things, I'm one of the firefighters to help anybody with any problems they have, whether it be COVID, and can we get people into the country? If there's an incentive, how much money can we negotiate? And often, sometimes we have to negotiate that. I'm kind of that guy, like if you're trying to figure out how to do something, call Jay. He probably knows somebody or has experience doing it somewhere on the planet. And if not, I'm probably one phone call away from somebody who can really be very helpful. So it's kind of a very creative job. On the other hand, I still oversee some productions. I'm a production junkie. I was a line producer. I love the nitty gritty, but I have this wealth of background and knowledge and experience that I just love to help people and share people. And I love the creative process. So it's really a fascinating job in 2022, given the amount of money and streaming that's going on all around the world. So, and I get to, this week I was talking to people in Vietnam and, Eastern Europe and South America. And it's a fascinating world of production we're living in right now. And,
sounds like a really interesting job. And now we're going to get into a little bit of some of those other details, but now I want to go a little bit backwards. Now that we understand your current role, let's go back to the beginning. What's your origin story? Tell the audience where you came from.
Yeah, and people that know me have heard the story, so I'm going to do the slightly kind of get to the point. But it's a quickly fascinating story to say that I was born here in Pasadena, grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, home of our wonderful president right now, and my mom actually taught high school with Joe Biden. That's how small Delaware is. But I grew up as a musician. My parents were amateur musicians, and music was my life, and it still is my life. But everything I see kind of through a music lens in terms of the creative process, in terms of business, and so on and so forth. And so by the time I got to the end of high school, I played music every day. I played in the rock band, the jazz band, the concert band, and or actually worked at a music store. But at that time, you were either there were kind of two things. Either you would aspire to be a rock and roll star,
Okay.
or a music teacher. And so I wasn't going to be a rock star as much as I maybe would fantasize about it. It's not going to, come on, let's be real. And a music teacher, I love teachers. Teachers are very important, but it's like, I don't know if music teacher is quite enough. So I had the wonderful fortune of a mom who was a teacher. And I found Boston University that had a great music program, but also one of the top at that time communication schools, meaning I would call a media school in the country. And so I went to Boston University, love Boston. My roommates were musicians. I was still hanging out with musicians. I actually took classical piano lessons all and during college, I would sit on the way home back to my dorm and I'd sit and practice my classical piano every night, which I now realize was probably good for my brain and other things and so on and so forth. But I found this world of filmmaking. And for me, the process of filmmaking, not dissimilar to the process of making music, right? It's a very creative process. It's dynamic. You want to work with people that are really good at what they do. You bring a group of people together. I often use the metaphor of an orchestra playing with a conductor. It's just like a film set. The conductor's the director and he's conducting all the people. They need to have good music in front of them. It's a good script. How do we all come together? How do you create an environment where these great people can make great music, just like the filmmakers on the set? And so, you know what? It sparked me. It's the creative process. And also when I was in school, there was something, and this is again one of those things. It's kind of there was something about business, and I was a business minor, and I'll never forget going to my economics classes. For whatever reason, it sparked me. I love my economics classes. I would go to the teacher and say, I don't know why, but I really enjoy this stuff. There was something clicking in my brain that way. So I ended up being a television production major with a business minor, which cut to all these years later, kind of what I do.
Right.
I help the creative process, but I'm really more oriented on the business side, but I still play music. And, creative people, there's a way to deal with creative people and help and support creative people. At the end of the day, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to support creative people in the creative process from the business side, but being sensitive to that. That's really important to my story and who I am.
Interesting. And so you get out of Boston University, and prior to your time at HBO back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, you spent time working as a producer, assistant director, line producer, as you mentioned, production manager. Talk about that time in your career. Were you on the career path that you wanted at that time, or did you always kind of see kind of the executive operational role that you're in now?
Actually, I was chatting with a student today. These days I call Fridays I call it Helpful Fridays. I like to mentor people and give back on Fridays. That's part of how I structure my time. It's a long and winding road. There are many professions you get trained as maybe a scientist, you get trained as a doctor, you get trained as a lawyer. Boom, 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 boom. You work for the firm, or you work for the hospital, very linear by and large. Our business, I truly believe, is not linear. It is a long and winding road. And it's very much about you figuring out what road you're going to go down. And then am I staying on the road? And is this what I really want to do? And I get more experience. And because of the amount of time and energy, it's easy to get burned out, right? Because sometimes you have to work really hard. And then it's like, okay, but then how do you balance your life with that? And so on and so forth. So for me, I kind of like playing music. I like being involved with the process. I like being around these high energy, stimulating, smart people. And so I was a production junkie for the first decade out of school. So I was doing news. I was working with people in Boston. We were, in essence, the ABC News Bureau in Boston before they even had a news bureau. We'd pick up the producers at the airport. We would go shoot a story. It's on ABC Nightline, ABC World News Tonight. I would do Nightline shoots. We would do Good Morning America shoots. I did shoots for other productions out of Los Angeles. We worked with Barbara Walters. That then segued into larger productions. And with the music video era, I started producing music videos when I moved here to Los Angeles.
Okay.
And again, not dissimilar to the news, they'd say, well, there's this album coming out next week. We need a music video. So fly to London and spend $500,000 or $1 million doing a music video, because it would, you could launch an artist during that time.
Sure.
So I did that for 2 or 3 years, again, after the news. And it's like, okay, this is fun. I'm traveling around the world, making things happen, and got very good at making things happen really quickly. But then I'll never forget, I went to Russia. We were doing a Billy Joel HBO concert, one of the first times I got to work for HBO. And we flew to Russia to scout and actually plan. And I was like, wow, this planning stuff, this is kind of helpful, as opposed to like me getting a phone call and having to make something happen tomorrow. I got a couple of months here to plan this. That's a good idea. So maybe when I grow up and I'm an adult, I get to plan these productions.
Okay.
And so that spoke to me. And then it's like, when I aspired to be really a feature film line producer, which I got to do, I started working at Propaganda Films. I was David Fincher's music video and commercial producer for a few years, which was great training, and to this day, one of the most talented directors I've ever worked with. And then got to work with Wes Craven doing Nightmare on Elm Street with New Line. And I was really aspiring to move into the feature film world. And then this HBO job came along, and it was like, this is interesting. And I've been asked to do these production jobs, but never aspired to be inside of the corporation, because my father worked for DuPont and it just wasn't the politics. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. But lo and behold, I said, let me give it a shot. We had our first child, and let me see what it's like to work on the corporate side. And I'll never forget the first day walking in Century City, sitting in my office, just like kind of aghast. I never, ever imagined myself sitting behind a desk doing a production job, especially being out in the field, because we all know people on crews sit around and go, those production executives, they don't know. They're not out here. Well, I had lived on sets for 14 years, so I know what it's like to be on a set. And so I think that was one of the things, and it's always been kind of the history, a lot of us at HBO, almost everybody on the production side at HBO, post-production, we've all come out of the field. We know what it's like to be there at 3:00 in the morning, or to have somebody shut a production down, or to have we know what it's like. So I think that really helps us help the process, because we know how hard it can be. And it's hard. Production is hard, which is why you better love it, or it's going to burn you out, or you're not going to be a happy person. And then you should go on and do something else. But I got very fortunate just that I got to HBO at the right time, and things kind of, blew up.
Well, and that I wanted to ask you about that. So we're in the timeline here. We're about 1994-ish, give or take. And HBO then is very different than HBO today. And so talk about what the company was like back in the 1980s and 1990s, because it is very different than it is today.
Well, I think some people are aware there's a book that just came out, Tinderbox, about HBO. So if you want the definitive history, not that it's the definitive history, but it's it's almost 1,000-page book, but it does kind of lay out more about a lot of the people that were involved. But in essence, we started as a distribution company. Reminds you of some other big companies out there today, right?
Yep.
Distribution, but very quickly became really, besides distributing, have your own original content. Again, these themes sound like a lot of companies we're talking about out there in the world today. That original content was going to be helpful because it would differentiate you beyond just being a distributor. And so in the 80s, they started doing original content. But this was a very different landscape out there. And, technologically, we were a satellite company. We were distributing in a way that other people hadn't. Again, really interesting similarities between other companies, and talk about distribution. But, we were cutting edge distribution. Then we were somewhat cutting edge original programming. And by the early 90s, it was pretty clear that this original programming was going to be a very important part of the future.
Right.
And so that's what was intriguing to me, is that I had worked on some of these HBO productions, and they were cutting edge productions with really smart people. And then the idea of that growing, and it's like, okay, if I'm not going to be out in the field all the time, or partly for me, it was like, let's go in-house for a couple of years and understand how it works kind of on that side of the lane, so that I could be, initially, I went there just to be a better producer. I figured if I work two or 3 years inside of HBO, if I go back out producing, I'll know how the studio works and so on. I'll just be a better producer.
Hmm.
But I happened to get to HBO at the right time. And when I first started, I was running the films group, and we were winning all these awards and getting all this notoriety. And it's like, first 6 to 12 months there, I'm working with John Frankenheimer. I mean, world-class directors. I go, oh, this is, I like this. This is interesting. And we're winning lots of awards. That's a good thing. And when I was a freelancer, I'd get sent 10 scripts and maybe one or two were good.
Right.
I hope I can work on that show. At HBO, when the projects come to the production department, they're good scripts. We get spoiled. I don't read bad scripts because they get stopped in the production process. They don't get to us. Then we realized that we needed to grow, that this original production was going to be the future.
Right.
So we went from doing, at that point, original movies, which was the original movie division was kind of like that and documentaries that Sheila Devonshire were really the mainstay of original production. And then it was like miniseries. Oh, we should be doing these miniseries, this Band of Brothers, right? And
Hmm.
Good Angels in America. And then, and these original TV series. We had the Larry Sanders Show, but what about the Sopranos and so on? And it was just kind of blowing up around us. And then we got to high-end television and Game of Thrones, and the rest was, really the rest is history in terms of what set us up for what's happening in this high-end content streaming world that we're living in today.
So you've been around HBO for a long time now, and you've seen the evolution, as you mentioned. But at that time, you took on new roles, it seemed like every couple of years, and added to your plate. What did HBO see in you and what you were doing that they wanted to keep adding to your plate?
Yeah, I say this very humbly. I think one of the successes for HBO for so many years was that there was a core group of people, and we all knew each other. And I'll bring in the metaphor of a production. When you create a team of people, what makes for a team that's successful is great. You need to have some stars and really talented people, but a team of people is everybody working together and taking the strengths of those people and pushing those strengths. And when there's weaknesses, having people help you with the weakness. And I think that was really one of the kind of hidden secrets of HBO for so many years, is that we all knew each other. I knew Richard Plepler knew everybody in the company. Even as we transitioned, people kind of, on any given day, if there was an issue that came up, you were one phone call away from probably getting to the person who would take care of the issue or be a support. And by and large, the people across HBO were the best in the business. We were on the cutting edge of so many things. And so therefore, having these A-level people on so many levels, business evolved. We knew to be competitive, we had to go to the next level. And so it was kind of built into the culture. Well, figure it out. If you're going to be good, and if there's a new challenge, how do we figure it? And so it was just this very high level of expectation and support, which was really unique. And the challenge was to come to us, whether it be business or technical, and part of the job is to be on the cutting edge, what's coming in the future. And so it was built into the culture of having to be this cutting edge company. And it's fun to work in that. So people didn't want to leave. And the company, I think, also had the wisdom to say, as things evolve, well, I know this person and he's talented at this, so I trust him. So why not put him in this new role? Because he's probably going to figure it out, and I'm going to support him. And there's something to be said about trust and integrity that builds up between people. So I was fortunate enough to challenge to be thrown at me. Here's a different kind of production, or here's more money to spend, or whatever. Then go figure it out. Or in the case of my role right now, incentives that I'm very much involved with. In the 90s, they barely existed. There was Canada.
Right.
And now we would do a couple of productions with incentives, but even through the 2010, 20, 30, 40% of our productions now, you're looking at 70, 80, 90% of the productions have an incentive. It's completely become an important part of the business. Well, we kind of need an expert, and I had production, and I've been dealing with different government relations. So it kind of evolved into me and I found I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little nerdy. Yeah, but I love incentives. I love talking to countries around the world. I think it's fascinating.
Yep.
And trying to figure out where to put a production. And it's just a big puzzle piece to me, and I like it. So I found myself doing that. So I think that was always the thing about HBO, is that we were always kind of evolving. And it was a small company. You'd figure things out and say, well, I think this person can do that. And our head of business affairs right now started the legal department, and she was a very good lawyer, Susanna Felleman, and brilliant. So why not have her work in business affairs? And now she's running the business affairs department. So I think that understanding talent, understanding strengths, and so on. And I'm very humbled that I get to work with talented people, and they've seen some of my strengths and let them come out and give me a job that allows me to be passionate and excited about what I do.
Well, and it seems like that's a really important way of keeping, like, as the company grows, it's very easy to become a quote unquote big company where everyone is just kind of locked in and it almost becomes too much routine. Whereas you guys still almost seem to have the mentality of a small company, even though you've grown exponentially over the last few decades.
I think that's one of the things and challenges at all the companies. And I'm not speaking out of school to say this, that when you go in and work in a large company, and for us to go from HBO and Time Warner to AT&T and now another transition coming up, it's a very different dynamic when you're I worked in small production companies. First company I worked at I started as 3 people. And when I left, it was 20 people. So that's one kind of dynamic. And then I'd work at a production company where there's propaganda, where there was 100, 150 people. And then I went to HBO, and even though we were within Time Warner, we were our own little island. And that was 3,000 people. And then AT&T come along, it's 300,000 people.
Right.
So there's advantages of scale, but from on a personal level, I think the key, and this is what I've learned out of working in these bigger companies, is that it's great to have the resources of a large company, but at the end of the day, it's about a small team and group of people who are working closely together to make something happen. And I think the success that we've found even now within HBO, is that, there's an HBO group of people, some that have history and something, and we still tend to function as kind of like a small group of people within this large company. And I think if you can find in these big tech companies, at the end of the day, what impacts you the most on a day-to-day level? The people you interact with. I mean, there's 299,000 people across AT that I don't interact with, but that last 1,000 or 500 that I do, that's whether or not I enjoy my job or not. And so if you can find that group within that, and it's the same thing with government, John, if you work, government can be very bureaucratic, can be challenging, but if you find a great people to work with on a daily basis, they make it interesting and stimulating and push you. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so
you're right.
I feel very fortunate to still be part of a really high quality team, even amidst the giant corporate structure that I find myself in times.
Well, let me ask you a question about HBO Max. It's still in its infancy, relatively speaking. And when you're looking at projects, I mean, is there something that says like, oh, this is an HBO project versus this is an HBO Max project? Or are they truly just kind of an extension of each other? How do you guys look at projects as they come in?
Well, I think these days, certainly the landscape has changed. So in the old HBO days, there was kind of one sort of approach towards things. I think that with the content that's out there right now, with the competition and so on and so forth, certainly I think every one of the content people are thinking differently and having me think differently ways before, because at the end of the day, it's about getting people to come to you. I think pound for pound right now, I still feel that HBO's content is pushing through. There's a lot of competition out there, but these HBO projects, they're pushing through. And why are they pushing through? Because of the quality, because of the integrity. My list, as everybody else, I probably, I get a list of 50, 60 things that I want to be watching at all times. So if I'm going to pick one or two, I want to make sure, well, what's this hour going to be like at the end? And by and large, you watch something on HBO, you may not agree with the subject matter, you may not agree maybe with the position, but it will be done very, very well, right?
Okay.
And so I think that's at the end of the day, that's one thing. So if we're going to do it, you want it to say something, you want it to be done, whether it be from a subject matter or from the process of making it done at a very high level. I think the broadening of things, there was probably a certain kind of cultural that a lot of the HBO work spoke to. I think with HBO Max, we're probably doing broader stuff than ever before, right? Okay. You see the DC universe now, coming into us, some of the other IP that we are so privileged to have being part of Warner Brothers coming into our universe, alongside our, a classic HBO series like Succession, right? Or something like Euphoria or Righteous Gemstones, some of the things that are, or even Gilded Age right now. And again, even Gilded Age, perfect example of something that maybe something historically we wouldn't do, but in this day and age, let's try it. Same with Game of Thrones. We had never done anything like Game of Thrones before. That was a kind of a jumping off the cliff. But if we were going to do it, we were going to do it really, really well. And I think Gilded Age is a perfect example of something that I think it's done really, really well once again. And it's not for everybody, but if you love if you love the genre, you're going to love Gilded Age.
Right.
And that's what's happening. No two
Yeah.
ways about it.
Okay. You've mentioned the word incentives a number of times, and so let's talk about the world of incentives. And as you well know, it's a thorn in our side here in Florida. But big picture, give us your thoughts on the incentive world in our industry. How do you navigate the ever-changing impact that those have on projects, and where do you see it going? A year, 5 years down the line.
This is a big subject, so we're gonna try and keep us focused on this. So
Okay.
in this day and age, and I say this because I talked to a lot of different governments around the world, if you want to be in the game and you want a seat at the table, you really should have an incentive, because what's that doing? It's saying that you want our business there. So it's very helpful. Not to say that you can't have production in Florida. There's still a lot of production in Florida because it's a great place and there's beautiful looks there and so on and so forth. But it definitely makes it a little bit more challenging because I have 100 choices around the world of where to go shoot. And so the question that usually comes us first is, well, this is the project. Where's there an incentive where I can shoot it? But the incentives aren't the bottom line, because it's not just always the money. There's the look, the feel, and there's other things which are part of the greater process. So clearly we have to, those all play into that. But the other aspect is that these incentives are legislatively put together. And because new people come into government, we have to constantly be monitoring them because people make changes to them. And sometimes they want to put more money in, or they want to pull the incentive out or take it away. So it's part of the fun of it is that it's constantly evolving. And so we myself and the people I get to work with, we're having to watch this stuff constantly going on around the world. And some of the incentives have a certain amount of money. So how much money do they have this year? And some places you can go and just apply and get the money. Other times you have to make a business case for why you should be there and how much money. So there's a lot of behind the scenes negotiating that goes on, which is, to me, that's kind of the fun part of it. So I don't want to get too technical about it, but does that answer the question? Or I can go on for quite a while.
I have seen you on a number of panels, so I know the depth that we could get if we wanted to do multiple episodes just on that. So that's good.
I enjoy it. I never aspired to be like this incentive guy, but I found it and I enjoyed it. But it's because of all the people I get to work with and deal with. And if I can be of help to them, then great. And I like to help them. And it's something I get kind of nerdy and enjoy.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, despite, our ongoing challenges with a program for our state, we've managed to get a few HBO and Warner Media projects in Florida in recent years. In an overall sense, talk about your experiences of being in Florida.
Well, we're shooting there right now with the show with Issa Rae, right? We're shooting there because that's where he said wants to do it. It's where the show should be shot. And we've had great experiences in Florida, Recount. I mean, what an amazing picture that we did with Jay Roach on that. I mean, that's just a wonderful picture. So we've always had positive experiences in Florida, and all the people like yourself, John, and Susan Sims, and all the other wonderful people down there. I mean, they just are great advocates. They get the industry. They know how we work. They've helped us with bureaucracy. Because one of the things I say these days, when we bring a show, especially the scale of these shows now, it is a partnership between the production and the production company, very much the production, and the place where we're filming. So we come to Florida, we need you as a partner. And in order for it to work, we need you working behind the scenes with the people in government to get those film permits, right? To get the permission to do things. It is a true partnership. That's what that's the fun part of the creative process. And so am I looking at a country or a state where there's a culture of wanting our industry or not? Florida has open arms. You guys get it, right? And because of that, even without the incentive, you're still getting a lot of work because you guys service us so well. And we know when we come to Florida, we're going to get taken care of, and you've got experienced crews, and people in government understand it. I don't mean it to be an advertisement for Florida, but it should be, because you guys are doing great work even without the incentive. It's just that if you had an incentive, whoa, it would just blow up down there.
Right.
But there's still a lot of work, and because of that, and there's talented people there, and there's still, there's a lot of infrastructure there. So we have very positive experiences there, as I know all the studios do.
Yes, and that's great to hear, and we do appreciate the support, because it would be very easy to kind of get taken out of the loop because of the challenges we've had in the incentive. But to your point, we focus on what we do have, which is locations, the history, the infrastructure, and as we say, like, you can't put a price tag on service and all that. And so that's what we do. That's what we can control right now. And so that's what we focus on.
And John, I mean, obviously you guys understand the entertainment business, you understand media, with the success of Disney and Universal and the entertainment business as a whole, and the football and so on and so forth. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Florida fan. Yes.
And we are happy to have you on board.
Thank you.
Last official question is kind of the obligatory one. What advice would you give someone wanting to follow your path in the industry? I mean, who wouldn't want to be an executive at HBO? So how does somebody follow in the path of Jay Roewe?
It's a long and winding road.
Uh-huh.
And so just try and get going on a road that seems to, and what I tell people all the time, I think our industry is one of the ones where you have to go out and start doing it and find out what speaks to you. There's two things I always say: try things and see if you like it. At the same time, listen to the people around you and see if they think do you enjoy what you're doing? Like, do you think I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now? And also, am I good at this? Right? Often for me in my career, a lot of times people have come to me saying, I think you might like doing this. Why don't you try it? I'm like, I never thought of being an executive. I didn't aspire to that. If people hadn't come to me and said, try this out, you might begin. I was like, okay. And then it started to speak to me, and it allowed me to have a life with my kids growing up, which if I was freelancing, I wouldn't have had. I would have missed them growing up. So, it's definitely a long and winding road. Listen to yourself and also listen to the people around you. And then you've got to find your way. It's not an easy straight ahead road, and it's going to be bumpy, and so on. And lastly, find people of like mind and like integrity and kind of share your values. That's doesn't get better from that standpoint. And I think it was one of the things early on HBO. I just felt like the people at HBO were like, you know what? Smart, classy people. If I'm going to hang out with people, these are the kind of people I want to hang out with. And I've been lucky enough to hang out with a number of people for quite a while, and it's still going. So there's a lot of new people these days, but there's a few of us still left, so to speak, as I like to say. But
that's excellent advice. And so Jay, I know how busy you are. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to visit with us and be on the Film Florida podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today.
All the best. My pleasure. All the best to you, John, and all the people of Florida there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org or visit our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please consider going to our website and donating $20.22 for our 2022 fundraising campaign. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at filmflorida.creator-spring.com, and please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.